if the Broncos are going to pull an upset in Buffalo, Sean Payton has to be their biggest advantage. As a play caller, certainly, like he's going to have to find every little crack that they can expose in this Buffalo defense and put that all together. But then the other thing is being able to manage, like you said, the ups and downs that will assuredly come. There might be a point in this game where they're down 14 and it's an absolute gut check time. He has to be the steady wave in that.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for a playoff edition of Broncos and Bourbon. I am your host, Phil Milani. Very excited about today's guest. Nik Kosmider, who covers the Broncos for The Athletic, joins me, and we break it down, this big matchup, a wildcard matchup between the Broncos and Bills. And, the Broncos are taking this underdog mentality into Western New York, and who knows what could happen. There is a little bit of buzz out there on social media that of all the matchups this weekend, this game could be the most likely to see an upset, and I get into that with Nik. What will it take? What's the recipe here for the Broncos to go knock off maybe a Super Bowl favorite in Buffalo? And what's it going to take down Josh Allen? This guy's had an MVP type of season, only been sacked 14 times. And of course, the Broncos, they like to bring that pass rush. What's it going to look like when you've one of the strengths versus one of the strengths when they collide? What is that going to look like? What do you do if you're Vance Joseph with Pat Surtain? The Bills don't really have that number one type of wideout. They spread the ball around. So how do you defend there? And then, of course, on the other side, with Bo Nix making his first playoff start, of course, played in some huge games while he was in college. But this is going to be a little bit different. This is the NFL. This is the playoffs. How is he going to handle it? Because so far, nothing but pure composure from Bo Nix. What a rookie season he's had, and he leads this Broncos team into Buffalo, and we'll see what happens. I'm excited. The fact that we're still breaking down a game, as the playoffs start is just exciting, and we get into all of it with Nik. So I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. On the back end, our nightcap this week, our review is Old Forester 100 proof bourbon. So be sure to stick around for that. I think that you'll enjoy that. But first here, no more talking from me. Let's get right into my conversation with the Athletic's Nik Kosmider. Nik, thank you so much for taking some time to join the program. How's everything been going for you this year? I imagine that it's been fun covering a winning team.
It has, Phil. It's great to see you. I've missed having you around, especially because there's just nobody up at the top. And by the top, I mean like the atmosphere. I'm looking down at everybody now. I miss my fellow 6'5", 6'4", Twin Tower. It's just not the same, man.
I know, yeah. At those press conferences, sometimes the height can be an advantage, and then other times you're like blocking the cameras. So
yeah, get out of the way, tall guy.
Yeah,
know it
exactly. Well, I'm curious, what's been the sense around the team this week? There's so many young guys on this team, not a ton of playoff experience really across the board. What's the feel like in that locker room?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought last week going into the game against the Chiefs, the way I described it was a relaxed focus. Like the Broncos just couldn't seem, less bothered by the stakes at hand. And part of that was we ultimately realized just how much of an edge that they had against the players that the Chiefs were playing. And there was probably some comfort in that going in, but I just thought that overall approach last week, I was impressed by, and it really started on Wednesday, the way that Bo Nix, it was as relaxed as I had seen him at the podium all year long. And that carried over. And so this week, it's a little bit different. I think it's much more of a kind of a locked in, because they understand that every single detail in this game against the Bills is going to be critical. There's very little margin for error. And so I think you kind of just have this locked in focus on understanding that you gotta trap every morsel that you're learning this week into your brain and have it ready to kind of spill out on Sunday. So a little bit different the 2 weeks, but I think still, the energy's been good. They're excited for this opportunity. They've kind of rolled their eyes at this idea that, hey, you finally got to the playoffs. a lot of competitive fire with this team for sure.
Did you feel like that was a change last week from the previous two games, like going against the Chargers and the Bengals? Like, I don't know, just like watching them, it felt like, oh, they realized what the moment was in the couple of those games, like particularly like the overtime against the Bengals. Like, they just sort of like maybe tightened up a little bit. Did you feel like that was the case those 2 weeks and then it flipped going into that Chiefs game?
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit. Like there probably was some of that. They got up, they played so well early in that Chargers game, and then they were still up 11 midway through the third quarter. And that's maybe where you saw it some, like the momentum in that game shift really quickly. And I think it was a reminder of just like how hard that this was going to be. But part of it too is, I mean, like the way the schedule fell, they just had to play two really good football teams on the road back to back. I mean, the Bengals obviously are playing as well as anybody. You don't get to whine about missing the playoffs when you start 4-8 and when you lose to the Patriots in your week one opener. But nonetheless, they are absolutely playing like a playoff team. And so part of it was just them understanding, like, look, we played tough against two really good teams on the road. Didn't quite get it done. But they knew all along, get to 10 and we're fine. And so I think they were able to carry that mindset into the Chiefs game for sure.
And now it really seems like they've adopted this young and hungry means that they're a dangerous team. They've like sort of maybe embraced this underdog role. Like, do you think that there is a belief there that like, hey, it's us against the world. Let's go prove everybody wrong.
There's part of that. I think some, but kind of asked about like the underdog thing. Courtland Sutton said yesterday, like, maybe, but we're just focusing on trying to win this game, like going through the week, figuring out what exactly it is that we need to do to win the game. The outside noise is kind of irrelevant to what's going on right now. And I think they've done a pretty good job, obviously, blocking so much of that out. They haven't allowed it to be a factor, or they wouldn't have won 10 games this year. And so I think they've done a good job this season compartmentalizing it. But Sean Payton did allow, like, hey, this is the time of year where, like, as a coach, you really try to stiff arm distractions. Like it's the biggest, it can be kind of a critical, enemy when you are trying to prepare with the focus that is absolutely required in a game like this. And so I think they're trying to just kind of keep everything in perspective, keep it normal as best they can, and kind of see where it falls from there.
What do you think this opportunity means for a guy like Sutton or, like Garett, Bolles, like guys who have really been through some of the lows here with the Broncos? Now they finally get, this first taste of some postseason action.
Yeah, I think Mike McGlinchey described it pretty well. He's obviously been to the playoffs before, but coming into the locker room on Monday, he said it was just like everybody just had this like great energy. Like this is the time of year where a lot of them, like that was the day that they were packing up their lockers and it was somber and you're getting ready to go home. Like now they're so excited to keep working together. And this is really a close knit team, Phil. Like this, you've covered a while. I've covered it for quite a while. Like this is, and winning always helps, but I think this team truly has like an affinity for one another that is unique. And so that's their kind of whole thing of this is awesome that we made the playoffs, but it's most awesome because we're still getting to do this together, and they don't want that ride to end. And McGlinchey's like, why would you want this feeling to go away? And so, yeah, that's why for them it's just like let's keep this train going.
Do you think that could be a good thing? Like this team, I think Sean even said this, was like, they don't know what they don't know, like there's sort of like that youthful like energy to them where they're like, look, we're just like sort of enjoying this moment and, we're a close team and, like, let's just go see what happens.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's probably some of that, like as kind of like an overarching feeling to it. And obviously Buffalo is a team that, they've been here a lot, and the pressure really is on them to, a guy like Sean McDermott and Josh Allen to get to a Super Bowl like that. They haven't been able to do that and really haven't gotten that close since the 13-second famous game against the Chiefs. So there is a lot of pressure on the Bills to make this a run that gets them to the Super Bowl. The Broncos, at least externally, don't have that. But again, I just think that like their view is, hey, like how do we put together a game plan that can win? And also, this is a team, Phil, that haven't beaten a true power this year. Like they have a win against, a really good win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers team on the road in week 3. But But outside of that, they don't have a win against a team that ended the season with a winning record, except for the Chiefs. And of course, we know that they didn't play their top guy. So this is an opportunity for them to say, like, listen, we've been close in a number of these games. They haven't lost a single game by more than a possession this year. And Bo Nix has talked a lot about, like, we've had some of these late drives. We want one of these drives to be, for the win. And so I think more than anything, it's them just saying, like let's get one of these against a really quality opponent and then keep moving on.
How do you think that Bo will meet this moment? I saw Sean said that look, he's played in a lot of big college games. How do you think that? Because for me, it feels like Bo has been really level-headed and confident this whole year. It hasn't seemed like anything has been he hasn't let the hype get to him. How do you think he'll handle this?
Yeah, I think from all the externals, the extraneous stuff, I think he'll be good. I think he's probably earned that trust by now, just from anybody watching him and certainly his teammates and coaches, that he is not going to shrink in the moment. I don't think there's any kind of concern. Now, there have been times where he gets a little bit excited, his feet get out of rhythm. There is going to probably have to be some moments where, he kind of catches himself and says, okay, this is a long game. Let's slow this down. And that's probably going to go for any of those guys who haven't been in that situation before. But I think extraneously he'll handle all that stuff, just fine. I mean, people have talked a lot about, it's going to be 20 degrees. That was what it was here on Sunday, and, had one of the, had the most accurate passing game in team history. So, I think he's going to be fine with all that. The thing that I'm curious about is just from a schematic standpoint, whether they can take advantage of some of the things that the Bills are vulnerable against. And some of that is, quarterbacks on the run, outside the pocket, have been able to, find chunk plays against this Bills defense at times. That has been a strength of Bo Nix's. When he gets out, when he moves, puts defenses in a little bit of a bind because of his ability to run. They're going to have to take advantage of a lot of those kind of situations. They're going to need to get the ball outside and really be on their P's and Q's in terms of setting up these screen plays that we know are going to be a heavy part of their offensive game plan. And he's going to have to be, completely on target with those because, again, when you run those plays, it's every detail. It's the blocking being set up right. It's the ball being thrown to where the guy doesn't have to stop and wait for it or anything like that. So he's got to be really sharp in there. But if he is, I do think that there's some opportunities for this Denver offense to attack the Bills defense.
They're probably going to have to put up some points, don't you think, Nick? This Bills offense is so dynamic and so balanced, really. I think that they're the first team in NFL history with at least 30 passing touchdowns and 30 rushing touchdowns. How do you see the Broncos trying to defend that side of the ball?
Yeah, part of it is just you have to move on to the next play. That's such a big thing psychologically about playing the Bills because there's going to be some frustrating moments for a very good and proud pass rush defensive front unit that is used to, kind of having the payoff of getting to the quarterback. There's been few seasons in recent NFL history where it's been harder to take down a quarterback than it's been to take down Josh Allen this year. Only 14 sacks, in 17 games this season. And really they pick up pressure so well that they're only getting pressured on a third of opponent blitzes. So that essentially means even when you send extra rushers, you have a hard time getting to Josh Allen. And then when you do get pressure, this was a stat I heard from Benjamin Solak at ESPN today, on only 8% of actual pressures does Josh Allen take a sack. So it's just very hard to get down. And so you're going to have to continue to roll with the punches. He's going to make big plays. He's going to have plays where you think you had him dead to rights and he escapes. You just have to keep going. I think fourth down in this game is going to be critical. I think both teams will have a number of opportunities on fourth and short to go for it. They've both been pretty aggressive in that way, both been pretty successful in that way this season. Can you get a couple critical stops like you did in Cincinnati, which was really a key factor in keeping that game within one possession the entire time?
Do you think that's a good thing for the Broncos, being strength versus strength, because this pass rush, the most sacks in franchise history this year, a lot of these guys having breakout seasons, Jonathan Cooper, Zach Allen, of course, Nik Bonitto. Is that a good thing that it's hey, this is the Broncos' strength going up against one of the Bills' obvious strengths here too?
Well, I think it's certainly better that they didn't have the fewest sacks in the league going into this game. I think that because even if they're not necessarily taking him down a lot, I just do think that Denver's depth on the defensive front, their ability to continue to, George Payton, when he got hired as general manager in 2021, I remember this, says we want to be able to send waves of pass rushers at the quarterback. The Broncos, it took a few years, but that's what they have this year. They just have they come at you relentlessly, and I think even if you're not fully getting to him, if you can speed Josh Allen up and give the defensive backs that extra second that they're going to need to try to stick with a guy like James Cook, who's lethal out of the backfield, or Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox. It's a very egalitarian offense in terms of everybody gets to play. So you're going to need everybody to have whatever advantage that they can have in coverage. And so I think it is critical that this Denver defense is as good at this as they are, because again, even if they don't end up sacking him 3 times, that their presence can still impact this game.
Yeah. Like Josh is like 6'5", 240 or something. So like once he gets outside, I don't know that many DBs that want to, meet that train. So keeping him in the pocket, I think it'll be big too. So you mentioned that how the Bills like to really spread this thing around. I think like 13 guys caught a touchdown for them this year. Is that tough? Like, because you don't have like the one guy that you could just like throw Pat on and say, hey, let's just take this guy out of the game, or at least try to, or do you think like, it doesn't matter? Like, this secondary is going to have its hands full all day anyway.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an advantage for the Bills going against a team that anchors its defense around Pat Surtain, because so many teams have a top guy where so much of their offense revolves around making sure that they get that guy the ball. And Pat Surtain has routinely taken that guy away. He's one of the few cornerbacks in the league that can truly do that. And when you don't have that guy, like the Bills can be completely fine without Amari Cooper being involved. Or maybe it's a game where you're completely fine without Keon Coleman being involved because so many other players are doing their job. Now, it's still beneficial that whoever Pat Surtain is on is not going to be able to do a whole lot. You still shut down like kind of that side of the field. That's still an advantage, but it's just not as critical to Buffalo's offensive game plan as it is for other teams. So it somewhat mitigates, I think, Pat's impact. But maybe there's an opportunity for him to roam a little bit more because of that, and and disguise some things and make some plays. He'll still have a huge impact in this game.
We've talked so much about how the Broncos really don't have that much playoff experience, but the one guy who has a lot of experience is the head coach in Sean Payton. But like he's had like an interesting ride, it feels like, Nick, in the playoffs here. Of course, famously called that onside kick in the Super Bowl and had that big win in 2009. But since that point, there's been a lot of like heartbreak in like some really memorable ways. Like you think about like the Beast Quake in Seattle. You think about like the miracle in Minnesota, the no pass interference call against the Rams. How do you think like Sean's experience, having lived through so many of these highs and lows, will play a role in this game?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It's almost like previews a column that I'm writing for Saturday, and that if the Broncos are going to pull an upset in Buffalo, Sean Payton has to be their biggest advantage. As a play caller, certainly, like he's going to have to find every little crack that they can expose in this Buffalo defense and put that all together. But then the other thing is being able to manage, like you said, the ups and downs that will assuredly come. There might be a point in this game where they're down 14 and it's an absolute gut check time. He has to be the steady wave in that, because he is the one with the wealth of experience. He's the one that has won a Super Bowl. He's the one that has been in a major amount of high stakes playoff games. And so he has to be their advantage. He's got a rookie quarterback that he has to put in the very best situations he possibly can on Sunday. The preparation throughout the week, and what we saw from him. He kind of said himself, just maniacal focus on details. He has been yearning for this moment ever since he walked away. From the Saints after the 2021 season. This is where he is supposed to be a separator. And so if they're going to win, he has to be their biggest advantage on Sunday.
And like, how much do you think he thinks about those types of things, like his legacy and like, what he'll be eventually remembered for? Like, it feels like playoffs are really where you start to make a name for yourself, like certainly on the field, but also as a head coach too, right?
Well, yeah, he knows that he has an opportunity to chase the thing that no other coach in NFL history has done: lead two different teams to a Super Bowl title. And yeah, hey, here we are in January 9th. That's in his purview. That's an opportunity that he has right now. And so I think that's always like a driving force. But it's interesting to me. He said this a couple times. It's like when you taste something like the playoffs, like winning in the playoffs, or getting to a Super Bowl, you want everybody that you're close to be able to taste that. He compares it to like going to try a restaurant that blows your socks off, and you want to call everybody and say, hey, you got to go to this place. He has the opportunity to help them experience this euphoria that few people get to experience. And so I think that's his biggest driving factor, especially with this team that he just clearly likes so much, is giving them that opportunity. So I think that's the driving force. But yeah, I think we'd be naive to think that he doesn't know the stakes of like what he could accomplish as that coach who gets to be the first one to do that. Andy Reid, as great as was in Philadelphia, obviously didn't win when he got to the Super Bowl. Don't see him leaving Kansas City more. Doug Peterson was a guy that had a chance. Now he's out. He's out of head coaching right now. So Sean Payton has that opportunity, and yeah, we'd be foolish to think he doesn't know that.
Yeah, I think only like a handful of guys have ever even made it with two teams, and nobody's ever won it. So yeah, that's a way you can make a name for yourself, or like sort of like cement your legacy as one of the
Cement your
best.
hall.
I mean,
Like
yeah,
if you
yeah,
do
yeah,
that, you're in the
exactly.
Hall of Fame. All those kinds
Yeah,
of things.
yeah, exactly. You think this team can make a run? Like, does it feel like, hey, if you get by Buffalo, like, hey, anything is possible at that point?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, if you get by Buffalo, which monstrous challenge, 8.5 point underdogs for a reason. I do think there are paths to victory, but again, it's gonna take playing near perfect football. But if you get by them, like they already have the confidence and the knowledge that they can go to Kansas City and play well enough to win. They did that earlier this year. They by all accounts, you lost the game. You didn't execute the final play the way that you needed to, but you were right there. You did enough just before that last moment to win that football game, and so that would create a lot of confidence. I think they match up well with the Chiefs. They certainly wouldn't be favored in that game or anything like that, but it definitely would be possible. Set up perhaps the AFC title game in Baltimore. They'd have to exercise some demons there.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the beauty of the playoffs is every week, like you get to draw up a fresh game plan. You get to have a fresh strategy for how to attack a team and give it everything, single thing that you have, and let the chips fall where they may. And that's the opportunity that they've earned right now.
Yeah, you see it all the time where there's a big upset, especially in that wild card round. Anything could really happen. You mentioned them playing a near perfect game. Last one, just on the Broncos here. What do you think that it'll take for this team, and do you see it being possible this weekend?
I think it's possible. What it's going to take is a few things. One, we know Bo Nix has had, I think, 7 games this year where he has 200 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. It's the most by a rookie in NFL history of that particular stat package. He's going to need to produce one of those games. This is a Bills defense that is pretty good at taking the football away. You have to be able to avoid that. Like there's just not a lot of leeway for self-inflicted mistakes for the Broncos in this game. So that's one. Enough efficiency where you're also taking a couple big shots, hitting them, and then taking care of the football. That's number one. Number two is this Buffalo defense, our offense, like we said, has not turned the ball over, has not put it in harm's way. You need to be able to get enough defensive splash plays where you're going to put them in a couple third down binds. I think that's critical because if they just become a locomotive train and they're not interrupted at all, then you're going to have a hard time matching that, no matter how well your game plan is executed offensively, just based on the firepower. So that's the biggest thing. Like, come up with a couple fourth down stops, put them in some disadvantageous third and longs, and you'll give yourself a chance.
It seems like that defense really has been like that high or low. Like, they made those huge, touchdown plays, game changing plays on defense. Even on offense, those, the big shots to Sutton or Mims, it feels like you're going to have a few of those too. So
Absolutely.
you never know though, because like you said, the pressure is all on Buffalo here. If that thing's tight late in the fourth quarter, like who knows what could happen. So
100%.
it should be interesting. Okay, here's a few on you here, Nick, just to get to know you a little bit better. We call this segment Phil's Five. Who was your favorite player growing up?
Dan Marino. Yep, huge Dan Marino fan. My dad was in the Army. The quick backstory: we lived in upstate New York. He was stationed at Fort Drum. When Hurricane Andrew happened in 1992 in Florida, his unit dispatched to help with the relief effort. He came back. I was about 7 at the time. He came back with all these like Miami Dolphins things, and I hadn't really known anything about football at the time. But that was sort of my entry door into like watching the Dolphins, and then just became obsessed with Dan Marino. Wasn't alive for his storied 84 rookie season or anything like that. But 92, 93, he was still in the prime. So yeah, Dan the man was my guy.
Yeah, that's a good favorite player. I mean, he's awesome. So I think that was Peyton Manning's favorite player too, growing up. So
yeah, yep.
There you go. So
best pure passer ever.
Oh yeah, just the up and out, like he just got it out so fast. I mean, it was amazing. Who's your favorite player now? It doesn't have to be football. Anybody in any sport. Who a guy that you know, or just any favorite athlete right now?
That's a great question. I've always loved Serena Williams because basically just because of her, just like the fierce competitiveness that she has. Like it's one that if you were a professional athlete or in any endeavor, you would want to like try to model after. I've always loved Serena Williams. She's definitely up there for me. Yeah, that's a good one. But on that, like she's always my go-to. But I'd have to think beyond that.
Okay. Another good one there. Did you have like a favorite person in the media, like a favorite writer growing up that you maybe inspired you to get into this business?
As I was starting to become a journalist and get into this industry, Wright Thompson was a guy who I always really enjoyed reading, was really just fascinated by the way that he could, tell great stories without like writing, all these sort of long verbose sentences, the ability to be, snappy, yet like, illustrative at the same time. And just his ability to just like get people to open up to him. He's always been one of my, just one of my guys that I looked up to quite a bit. Still love to read his writing, and he's expanded. He writes about whiskey now and all kinds of different things. So yeah, I'd say him for sure.
Okay. Good. That one's good. Do you have like a most memorable interview or like an interaction with an athlete that really from your career stands out now?
Ooh, oh, that's a good one. I think my favorite reporting I've ever done was when I was at the Denver Post in 2014. We followed around Adams City High School football team that spent the whole season kind of documenting their journey as a team that hadn't won a game in 3 or 4 years, and hired a new coach, former Marine Corps guy who just came in and you saw in real time like change this culture, and this team ended up winning 4 or 5 games that year, and just really kind of like turned around the whole vibe in their school. And so to me, like that's what it was. It's like, it's the storytelling part of it, and just being able to continue to follow those kids, journeys as they got older. Like some of them have kids now. Like it's kind of a cool deal.
How did that come to be? Like, how did you pick that high school?
So, we were just looking for something like that. Aaron Ontiveros, the great Denver Post photographer, had kind of had that idea for a while of just like following a downtrodden program as they try to resurrect things. And, it's kind of his research that helped lead us there. Ironically, I now live not that far from Adams City High School, so drive by it all the time. And that always resurrects a pretty cool memory.
That's awesome. You would have thought like, hey, one of these big name guys that you come across, but it's cool to hear that like, hey, the storytelling and the reporting for something like that, that's what made it memorable. So
Yeah,
that's
and
cool.
the kids weren't like, obviously these kids aren't like, there's no media training. You're not
Yeah,
trying to get crafted to not say this or say that or whatever, and you just listen to them, and you listen to their stories, and that's kind of the fun stuff to do.
most definitely. Okay, and then the last one here is what's like a sporting event that you haven't had a chance to cover yet that's sort of on your bucket list?
Yeah, well, as an NFL reporter who's never covered the Super Bowl, I'd say that's a pretty easy one for me. I've gotten to cover, obviously. I helped the Athletic cover the Nuggets championship run in 2023. So you got to be in there and witness what it was in real time for a team to win a title, and you'd always wanted to be in one of those locker rooms where they're celebrating and just kind of understanding what that felt like. So that was really cool. But yeah, covering the Super Bowl, I think, would be the coup de grace in terms of this job in particular.
Yeah, most definitely. Anytime there's like a championship and that confetti's falling, those moments like nothing really, like Sean said, there's like nothing that can compare to that. So
There's plenty of other sporting events that I'd like to do, but not like cover. Like I'd love to go to the Masters and just
oh yeah,
just hang out. Like I don't want to work. I just want to go see
yeah,
some of these things. But
yeah.
I'd say for working it, like the Super Bowl would just be kind of get your juices going.
Yeah. A lot of people mention things like that, like Masters or like Wimbledon or like an Olympics or like a World Cup, like some of those other sports that it seems like everybody wants to feel some of that energy. So
Yeah, 100%.
that's interesting. Okay. And then before we let you go here, Nick, we always end these with some career advice. What would you tell to a young reporter who's just starting out today? What's some advice that you would give to that person?
I think number one is just find what you like. Find a way to do it that you really like enjoy. If you don't like have fun doing this, you're not going to want to stick with it. I think that's like a lot of other things. So I think the biggest entryway is to get into, whether it's podcasting or social media or becoming a writer or, working just find your avenue where the day-to-day part of it, of trying to get better at it, of learning new ways to do that particular craft, that you really enjoy, like that journey, because there are aspects of this, just like any other industry, that really become a grind, like especially when you get into it professionally and you've got deadlines and you've got, all these kind of things hanging on your shoulders. You want to be able to fall back on, like, hey, for all the stuff that happens when I've done a bunch of interviews and I get to sit down and like tell a story, like that's the part of it I still really like. And that's what helps you get through, what is, sometimes some of the nonsense, or not even nonsense, but just like, some of the annoyances that again come with any job. So I think if you want to stick with it, you want to get better at it, you got to find an avenue where you're like, hey, this part of it, I really enjoy doing. I really get a lot out of it. And that's what's going to kind of keep me going.
Yeah, like it can't just be like, "Hey, I'm a big sports fan. Like I'd like to just do that." Like you have to really have passion.
Yeah,
passion for the craft.
that's the one where you say like, listen, yeah, I mean, congratulations, that does not make you unique. It turns
Yeah.
out there's quite a few sports fans out there.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it than that. But again, like the cool part about media now is like there really is, like, you get to dictate it. Like some of the stuff, we spend all this time talking to players and researching statistics and, crafting a story, whatever the case might be. And then you'll open up Instagram and, Bo Nix's management team or marketing team or whoever has created this like hype video that everybody's talking about. And it's really good. And it in its own way is storytelling. And whoever did that is excellent at it and probably drew a lot of joy. It's like what is it? Like a 20-second, 25-second clip. And yet it tells a story. So that's what's cool now is there's so many different ways that you can do this thing, that there's a lot of options for you to find out how you really like to do it.
Yeah, different avenues, creating new opportunities for everybody. So yeah, that is a really cool thing. So, well, hey Nick, I really appreciate your advice there. Great getting to know some of your favorite players and some memorable moments there for you. And of course, I really appreciate your insight on this Broncos team. So thank you very much for coming on the show. And hey, make sure you stay warm out in Buffalo. 20 degrees, low, maybe some flurries. Is that the report now?
Yeah, that's the report now. But I mean, hey, we're getting good practice for it right here in Denver. I took
Yeah.
my son to school this morning, and it felt like a snow tornado was blowing through. So yeah, we're getting good prep for it now.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, it was really windy too. Like it's like, gosh, I can't see anything out here. So, all right. Well, hey Nick, appreciate your time, and it was great catching up with you.
You too, Phil. Thanks a lot.
My thanks to Nick Kosmider from The Athletic for taking some time to really dive in and break down this Broncos matchup. It should be an outstanding game there in Buffalo. Tough place to play, I'll tell you what. Buffalo, obviously, in Western New York, you feel like you're sort of in a small town when you go in there. And then, the weather, of course, is a factor. The fans are absolutely crazy there. They jump through the tables and they light things on fire, and it's just sort of an insane scene because they really love their Bills. And then the other thing that's interesting is in that stadium, both teams enter the field and exit the field through the same tunnel. So, if you got any bad blood there or anything, you're exiting the field right next to each other. It just sort of is a unique atmosphere there in Buffalo, and it's a tough place to play. So, really looking forward to seeing how the Broncos handle this. Of course, big underdogs going there, but sometimes that can be a positive here, especially with this Broncos team, because one thing that we've seen with this Broncos team this year is that when they're able to play free and loose and say, hey, we got nothing to lose here, that's when they've played their best football. And, yes, they haven't beaten a true playoff team other than the Bucks way back in week 3. I think that this team has been in a lot of close games down the stretch, and that's going to help them going into this one, going against the Buffalo Bills. It is going to be tough to take down Josh Allen, though, man. This guy really just doesn't get sacked, and the Broncos pass rushers can't get frustrated in this one. They can't get caught where they're going too far up the field because Josh will take off, and that's where he's really dangerous on a broken play. He's either going to run the ball for 1,000,000 yards and score touchdowns that way, or he's going to throw the ball downfield and score a bunch of touchdowns that way. So you can't let him get out of the pocket. You got to keep him in there, and when you have the opportunity to bring him to the ground, you got to be sound tackler. So, guys like Nik Bonitto and Jonathan Cooper and Zach Allen, they can't get frustrated. You got to stay disciplined. And, who knows? Good things could happen. I will say I saw Dan Orlovsky really break some of the X's and O's down in this one. And while the Bills don't have that one dominant wide receiver that you throw Pat on, he was saying that one of the things they like to do is have a bunch of wide receivers, like 4 wideouts on one side and one guy on the other side. And then that creates some easy reads for Josh, where he looks to the one guy on one side of the formation. If he doesn't like the matchup there, then he can really just focus on this other side of the field. And then if there's any sort of breakdown there, he can find that open guy, or if it's not there, just take off. It sort of simplifies the game for Josh a little bit and lets him use just his innate athleticism. And that's how the Bills have had a lot of success. And a lot of teams have success, according to Dan, this way. And he was saying that you put Pat on the guy on the other side of the field, and that just sort of takes away half the field there. And that could work to the Broncos' advantage. So there's going to be some interesting X's and O's to see in this one. And then, of course, Bo Nix, they're going to have consistent play from him. None of these 3 and outs where, hey, a quarter of football goes by and the Broncos really haven't done anything. They're not going to be able to play like that against Buffalo because, look, the Bills are going to get their points. You just hope that you slow them down enough that you give the offense an opportunity there to try and match. You don't want to get into a shootout, so you want to limit possessions, but you know that the Bills are going to put up some points here. So Broncos are going to have to get into the upper 20s, I think. mid 30s. They can do that, but it's going to take some creative play calling. It's going to have to take some real great composure from Bo Nix, and you're going to have to see some of those deep balls to Mims or Sutton, and they're going to have to capitalize on the opportunities they can get. They can do this, but they're going to have to, like Nick even mentioned, it's going to have to be like sort of a perfect game here from the Broncos. So really looking forward to this one. One thing I did want to mention is like covering a Super Bowl. Like Nick said it, a couple of other people have said it this year that they really want to cover a Super Bowl, and I get it. Having covered Super Bowl 50, the Broncos back in the playoffs for the first time since then, having covered Super Bowl 48, a completely different feel, but being there, being around the team, there's nothing quite like the Super Bowl. I've always said this, that in the NFL, there's stages to the vibe around a game. There's the preseason, everybody's super loose. Everybody's just having fun, other than the guys who are really fighting to make the team. But for the most part, the starters, everybody like that, it's just a relaxed atmosphere. The weather's nice outside. It's great. Then there's the regular season. You get a little bit more locked in. You get a little bit more focused. And those games are huge. And then there's the playoffs. There's just a feeling around the building that it's win or go home. And you're locked in. And then, if you can believe it or not, there's one more step, and that's a Super Bowl. And there's nothing like being around a team, covering them those 2 Super Bowl weeks leading up to the game, and then getting ready for the game, the pregame, the vibe. There's nothing quite like that. And then, of course, if you're fortunate to win it and the confetti's falling and you're around those guys, it's a dream come true for them, and the jubilation there, there's nothing quite like that. I mean, of course, unless, other championships, but if you're covering football, there's nothing quite like that. And the Broncos now get an opportunity to go on that journey. So really, no matter what happens on Sunday, getting a taste of what this week is like for them, and then what the eventual game is like on Sunday, there's nothing quite like it. And it's going to go a long way in building where the Broncos eventually want to get to. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Let's get to the nightcap here. And, of course, that is Old Forester 100, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show. This is it's 100 proof. So, you're getting a lot of oomph here in the bottle. Just looking at the bottle, really a dark color. It's like a dark copper color. And the thing about Old Forester here is that it is the longest running bourbon brand on the market. Old Forester was allowed to still be in production during Prohibition because it was being used for medicinal purposes. So whatever you think about that, 100 proof, yeah, there's some medicinal purposes there. I'll say that. So, but yes, they've been making it for a long time on the back here. Nearly 150 years ago. Is when they first started making Old Forester. So you could pick up this bottle like in the mid-20s, I think. So certainly very easy to find, easy to pick up a bottle in the mid-20s here. It says here established 1870. So twist top. I don't know how I feel about that. How do you guys feel? Like, leave a comment. Like, what do you think about twist top? Or do you like the cork where you pop it and then there's sort of a different feel there? Okay, here, let me grab my Broncos Rocks glass here, and we can get into this here. Again, you see the copper color here. So the nose, you can feel that, there's that 100 proof in there. You can smell it. You pick up a little bit of caramel, a little bit of fruity, like it's sort of like almost like a cherry feel. I don't know if that's like the proof or if that's like a real cherry feel there. It almost kind of smells medicinal, It's really bold. You can really feel like it's oaky, and you can feel that proof. You can feel the nuttiness. You can feel it's spicy. You can taste that. Yeah, the finish is interesting. You pick up on those like baking spices. It's really seasoned. And then there's like a little bit of bitterness that like maybe you're not quite looking for like with your bourbon, and maybe that's why this is at this price point. It is like a little bit bitter a finish that like it could be just because I'm drinking it like neat here for this tasting, but maybe a rock would go a long way and maybe like giving it a little balance there, or like maybe a little bit of a smoother finish. It is a little bitter though. Yeah, that thing packs a punch. Old Forester is like sort of an interesting brand. Like it's been around for a long time. It's in that mid-20s price range, but they've been like doing things to like sort of like work on building the bourbons that they're producing. They now make like an Old Forester 1897, a little bit of higher price point, a 1920. I've not tasted those, but based off a little bit of research I was doing, what the difference is in the finish. Like the first taste and like the palate and the nose are very similar, but what they've done in those higher price points is remove some of that bitterness, is what I read. And having tasted this just now, you're definitely getting some of that bitterness on the finish there. And bourbon has been like come a long way here, where at this mid-20 $30 price range, you can really get some outstanding bottles. And so that creates sort of like an interesting market for someone like Old Forester, that they've now introduced these other bottles, the 1897 and 1920. And so like for this bottle here, where you can get this in like the mid to lower 20s, that's an interesting, it just sort of creates like a position in the market where you're like, okay, maybe this is for somebody who's just like looking to mix cocktails and wants a cheap bottle or something like that. But it definitely, otherwise, like it's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It's like it's spicy, and if you like those more assertive, and you're certainly getting a bang for your buck in the 100 proof here. But it is certainly bold. I'll say that it's seasoned and it's got that high proof, so you can really taste that here. So. A medicinal quality indeed here to Old Forester 100. So, all right, well, that's going to do it for us. If you enjoyed these conversations, or if you've enjoyed the show here, make sure you like and subscribe as we continue to build a community. Really appreciate all of you and the engagement and reading the comments. I'm having a blast here doing this, and no matter what happens this week for the Broncos, I'll be back next week, and we'll continue this thing on through the off season a little bit and have some fun here. Maybe we'll do a couple of live episodes or something like that. So really enjoying the podcast, and really appreciative to all of you. So please do like and subscribe, and also my thanks again to Nik Kosmider from The Athletic to provide his insight here on this big matchup with the Broncos and Bills. It's exciting. Playoff football has returned to the Mile High City. So certainly an exciting time to be a Broncos fan. So that's going to do it for us. For Broncos and Bourbon, I'm Phil Milani.